Now that apparent attempt of Jessica to sugarcoat her actual meaning got more and more obvious when Chloe started to turn away completely. Without exaggeration, I saw myself in that situation, in particular when I was ashamed recently due to my red face. In the exact manner she closed her borders to the external world, with the one important difference that she was able to read my thoughts. But this time, I had even trouble reading my own, so I didn't even try to read hers, since her behavior was way beyond comprehension. I mean, why would she almost cry about the exact matter we'd both eradicated before when we spoke about it? So somehow overwhelmed with the situation I saw myself confronted with, I stayed rather passive and listened primarily to Jessica, who was our active part, at least for the next couple of minutes, in which she presented quite similar riddles as before. Riddles that couldn't be solved from me, if those were riddles whatsoever. Afterwards, she slowly became quieter and planned to leave us when she wished us a pleasant night. She added, by the way, that she would return in the morning when her shift started. Then she disappeared through the door with the remarkable distinction that the air felt stiff and thick, as if we were inside one of the most severe quarrels ever. The source of that was clearly Chloe, since I felt quite good and Jessica was gone. So yeah. Actually, I thought we had cleared the air from any leftovers of negativity, but instead we even managed to pollute it somehow. As paradox as it may sound, my attempt to aim for a betterment for all of us resulted in the exact opposite, as I gained evidence on when I observed Chloe. In the meantime, she had changed her position and was then laying inside her bed facing away from me and being covered with her blanket. Not gonna lie, in a more illustrative manner, I almost saw the words "help me" written above her body, and thus it was more some sort of emergency than prior when I declared it as one. And that time, even the red button wouldn't help at all, since it seemed far away from a medical issue. Whatever it was, I had no clue. But even the most experienced doctor wouldn't help us or her with that. So I let the time pass by, and the only change that occurred was the sunset outside, which brought the darkness into our room. But the corresponding sinister atmosphere was already here for a long time, even when it was bright daylight. And it had the effect that a huge tension emerged, during which I was unable to conduct even little actions, for example turning on the lights. The simple background explained in a poetical way is that whatever demons were levitating above us on the ceiling, I left them in the dark where I couldn't see them. From time to time, I only heard a quiet sobbing sound from them, which I tried to ignore. The fear to switch on the lights came from the apprehension they would come at me if I did so. All in all, it was a rather lonely, dark, separated, abandoned evening, which didn't even leave space for our Uno session. And that was when it really started to burden me, as Uno was somehow our blessing to end the day. And seen from that aspect, I couldn't end the day like that. Also, because it was one of the last ones we would spend together. So out of that motivation, I did what I should have done much earlier. Press the switch on my bedside table and figure out what the hell was going on. Since wide areas of the room were illuminated then, I perceived Chloe still being in one and the same position in which she holed up shortly after Jessica's departure. Additionally, her faint sobbing vanished completely when I turned on the light, which made it even harder to approach. I'm not talking about physical approach, the verbal one was hard enough. But holding in mind what she already did for me when we were by far not that close to each other, I convinced myself that it was the least I could do. She made me feel so much better lately when I had to deal with my tomato face. And even though I knew nothing about the background of her sorrow, it just was my task as a friend or whatever we were at that point. I mean, lately she could only assume as well what the matter was with me. There was no such thing as certainty. But instead of arguing against myself basically, I ought to jump into action and do something for both of us. So then, awoken from my standby mode, I watched over her a little bit. I'm not quite sure what I wanted to see, but presumably I wanted to examine as to how my approach should look like. A little bit later, I decided on doing it the same way she did it before, namely, taking a distant seat on her bed and intending on making my way through her mental thought jungle. I knew exactly how it is to be captured by those twines, and the more you try to resist, the more they devour you. Empirically verified, the only remedy sometimes is one brave fellow who cuts all those shackles away from you. And what should I say? That was me. So I raised myself and made my way slowly to her side of the room. When I approached, I perceived the sobbing sound once again, which brought me a little off track, but not entirely, as I soon recalled my actual intention. I softly placed myself on her bed, without making too much noise or being too pushy. I let things settle as I made myself known, but didn't approach any further then. I only observed her reaction, and that was nothing spectacular whatsoever. Then I faintly laid my hand onto her leg, only to show her that I was there, in case she missed the signs I gave before. And my intention was not by any means to scare her pain away. To achieve that, I had much more gentle means. For example, talking. So in a first attempt to engage in a conversation with her, I spoke softly. "Hey Chloe, I am here." As a result, she turned around into my direction, but at the same time she held up entirely under the blanket. I used that as a chance to move yet a little closer, and from then on, I was touching her arm, as before, kind of through the thin blanket. I could feel that she reciprocated by grabbing my hand through the piece of cloth. But for me, it was nothing more than an even louder scream for help. Within a stylistic analysis of that situation, as I had to do countless times in my writing lessons, I would estimate the blanket as something we, or merely I, had to resolve to find my way to her again. The veil I had to perforate to see that sweet smile again. While still holding onto her hand, I used my second one to slowly uncover her face. I did it very slowly so that she had the opportunity to resist, in case she wasn't ready for an approach. But although that appeared to correspond to my expectation, she let me proceed, and as I unwrapped her face entirely, I saw two big eyes staring at me. They appeared almost as red as my face. That was not the remarkable thing though. Instead, they truly spoke to me, just as if Chloe herself brought up that message, which had, like before, the same content. Help me. I'm not even close to knowing how I should term that technique, maybe eye reading or something like that, but it was a matter of fact that I had to do something, because that sight made my interior freeze. So I used my second hand to approach her face and stroked softly over her cheeks. I somehow hoped to resolve any icy leftovers from both of us by sharing some warmth. Initially it worked, as she let down her walls a little bit more to grab onto my first hand properly with nothing in between. I briefly stopped stroking her face to initiate a shh gesture, only to show her that she didn't need to say anything unless she wanted to. Then I just continued rubbing her face softly, while she even commended that with a neutral facial expression. I'm not even talking about a smile. That was as far away as New York from Berlin. But at least she didn't look anymore as if she had to endure 2 years of daily heavy rain. With her other hand, the one she was holding underneath the blanket, she grabbed my hand, which was still stroking her cheeks. Then I could even notice a faint smiling expression as she turned onto her side, this time facing me. As she continued with her motion, she patted onto the space of her bed, which was located right next to her. Additionally, she clarified her intention by lifting the blanket a little bit. It was quite clear what she wanted to express, and due to that, I became incredibly nervous. After all, it was not my intention to use empathy to get into her bed. Although that really does work in general, as it is abused by many, I intended primarily to remove the dirty clouds from her vision, as she did it for me some days ago. Besides, those dirty clouds affected me as well, so it was also something to my highest good. But anyway, that crucial moment I had to deal with then revealed clearly what was demanded from me, an intended sleepover. I was well aware of the fact that I would throw everything away with one blow when I refused to comply with her. Except for that, I would have seemed a little bit indecisive if I had approached first, only to vanish minutes later with the exact opposition of my initial action. Basically, I had no other choice to spare our hearts, either hers or mine. So I stood up while she removed the blanket from the mattress she wanted me to lay onto. In a shy motion, I bowed myself more and more until I was laying right next to her. Afterwards, she covered me with the blanket. That situation still seemed kind of weird, although it was far away from the one which had occurred the night before. I mean, although the place was one and the same, the intention diverged crucially, as in fact we, did it on purpose. However, both our gazes were then directed onto each other, and as a result, I witnessed that her imaginary call for help had pretty much disappeared. Instead, I could see something like a thanks, but her smile was still missing somehow. Kind of odd that my mere presence made such a distinction, but at least it terminated some of my questions, as I thought about that situation later on. I was inside an idle space, to be honest, and didn't know what was going on, or what I should do, rather. I was laying next to her, and that was amazing without any doubt, but I ruminated about the next action. Should I sleep here, like a lover, or should I only stay for that long until she sleeps, like a friend? There were so many options, and so many wrong ones at the same time. Also regarding next morning. When I left, I would make myself reproaches again that I had no courage to go after the things I want. In fact, I knew exactly what I wanted, but that makes it even more difficult sometimes. So it was vital to use the opportunities that occur, and that situation in which I was already involved revealed itself as such an opportunity. So when I listened to my heart, there was only one true answer available anyway. And that one I followed.